Teaching a pattern unit is always a nice little break from counting in numbers and number sense. So I am back today with 4 unique patterning centers that you may not have seen before, but your students will love. Now, I would usually introduce these pattern stations, pattern centers, after I've taught the basics of patterns and after they've had some time to practice recreating patterns and extending patterns on pattern mats in a more traditional way. The first game is called Spin a Pattern. So for this game, you will spin your spinner, and whatever it lands on is the root of the pattern that your students will create. So once they spin, they get that root, put those 3 or however many tiles on their mat, and then after that they will continue that same pattern until they fill up the space. And this is a really versatile station because you can really use any manipulative that you have that has these 4 colors in. So the primary color is plus green. And I don't know about your students, but my students love anything with a spinner, and I really like spinner games as well because usually there's something that can be used over and over. It's not kind of limited by the end of a worksheet when the kids can stop playing that pattern center. And all of my patterning stations show examples of AB patterns, ABC. There's 7 or 8 different types of pattern types per station. The next patterning center is called roll a pattern. So instead of spinning the spinner, the kids would roll a dice, and whatever number they land on, they'll look at the key, and the key will tell them what the root of their pattern is, and then they will start there and then continue the pattern for 3 repetitions. This I would do after spin a pattern just because they do have to kind of keep track of their repetitions to complete this station. You don't want them to go too long and not actually get anything else done. There's also an optional recording sheet for this station, so once they've created their pattern, they can write the type of pattern that it is and color in the pattern that they created so that you can check later what patterns they're creating, if there's any misconceptions, or if they're having any trouble transferring a pattern from the actual physical objects that they're using to coloring it in, which is a little bit more abstract. Now these next 2 patterns kind of bridge patterning and number sense together. So my idea for teaching patterns is that they kind of understand the concept so that later on they can start to see patterns in our number system and patterns of the way numbers work to really be able to develop their number sense as they go on to other units. But these stations still feel like patterns but have some number sense built in. So you can use them during your patterning unit, or if your kids are kind of getting antsy with numbers and counting, you can add them into a traditional counting and number unit, and they'll think they're getting a little bit of break, but they're still kind of working on that number sense. So the first one is dice patterns. So these mats all have dice faces on them, and if your students are not ready for that, they can just use some manipulative that has the same colors as the ones on the sheet, and then they can just create a color pattern. But if they're ready, and kind of my thought process was that when you're using dice faces, those numbers, the kids should really be working on subitizing 1 to 6 on a dice face, among other things. But for these purposes, I'm talking about a dice face. And then from there, they can finish their pattern with different dice. If you don't have enough dice, you can use something like square inch tiles or links to make number patterns. So for example, if the pattern was 2, 3, 2, 3, so they would take the value of the dice face and use that to continue their pattern. So if the dice said 2, 3, 2, 3, then they would put 3 links together, or 3 tiles one on top of the other, and then the next step would have 2 tiles, and then 3 tiles, 2 tiles, 3 tiles, 2 tiles. One word of caution: if you're going to use the links, those can take the kids longer to clean up. So if you're doing more than one station, that might be something you want to think about and maybe skip the links. Or if you think they can go quick enough with it, by all means. The next center is called number tower patterns. So instead of having the dice face with the quantity on it, it just has the numeral. So if the pattern is 1, 2, 1, 2, then the kids would put 1 cube and then 2 cube, and 2 cubes, 1 cube, 2 cubes, 1 cube, 2 cubes. And this is really helpful for number recognition, for one-to-one correspondence, and for really understanding the value of those numerals that they're seeing. So they can see like 1 and 2, 1 and 2. They also see how what 1 looks like compared to 2 and understand that that's bigger. That 2, and understand that 2 is bigger than 1 always, like that's always the value of that numeral, and really develop their concept of number. And from there, your next steps might be really digging into your hundreds chart by means of choral counting or counting collections to understand number patterns and the way our number system works. If you'd like more information about counting collections, you can get that in this book, or stay tuned because my next video goes deep into how you would do choral collections in your classroom. So I hope you enjoyed these 4 unique pattern ideas. I will have them linked down below so that you can take a closer look, as well as the blog post with all of the instructions typed out. Happy patterning, and I will see you next time.